Hi, I'm John Feldt. We started off the year with about 67% of the nation covered in snow. Now, that's the most snow in over 10 years. Currently, it's about 60%. Now, last week I mentioned that we were going back into either a neutral or a slightly positive Arctic oscillation. When we're in a positive Arctic oscillation, oftentimes we get a split jet stream with a northerly branch and a southerly branch. The cold air is held to the north by that northerly branch, and oftentimes that southerly branch can bring precipitation. Now, last week it was pretty quiet. There was some snow over parts of Texas. This week it's going to be a lot more active as we get a center of energy that ejects from the southeast U.S., moves across parts of eastern Texas up towards the northeast U.S. into the Ohio Valley. So it looks like a pretty active week with heavy rain over parts of Texas. Now, the Pacific Northwest has been alternating between a busy week and a not so active week. This week will be another very active week with another 2 to 4 inches of rain and a lot of snow over higher elevations. I'll be discussing all these different type of patterns and precipitation trends on this week's edition of the Weekly Water Outlook. Here's a rain that fell across the nation, rain and snow actually across the nation last week. You can see for the most part it's been fairly quiet. There was a band of more significant rain that extended up in this region of the south central and southeast U.S. We had a band of snow actually in this area right here. Some welcome rain over parts of this region here, but for the most part it was fairly quiet. Even the Pacific Northwest was fairly quiet last week, and we had prolonged or fairly significant areas here of no rain whatsoever. These areas where no rain occurred at all last week. So if we look at a percent of normal, we can see those dark reds in those areas, and that's well below normal precipitation. Matter of fact, from a national perspective, the only area that received significant above normal rainfall or precipitation or snow was that area of snow from the far northwest part of Texas across the Oklahoma panhandle into Kansas. Everywhere else, it was pretty much a quiet week with not a whole lot of precipitation. Now, if we look at where snow occurred over the last week, the purple are the light amounts of snow, and the orange, yellow color and the greens are the more significant snow. So we can see that there was a more significant snow over Kansas and then parts of the northeast U.S. as that precipitation moved into the colder air. There was some significant snow up in the northeast U.S. Everywhere else it was pretty light. Over the whole northern tier of the U.S., precipitation was very light. It's cold enough. It came in the form of snow, but again, very light snow. Here's the snow depth as of early this week. What we can see is the areas, the shades of blue are the deeper the shade of blue, the deeper the snow, and this shows the extent of snow across the nation. We're still looking at soil moisture percentiles negative or needing of rain over a broad part of the middle part of the nation. Now, the changes that have been seen over the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've said a number of times, I think I said this in my newsletter, I'll say this a number of times, in winter we will almost always get some improvement. It's sort of like a fire that we have to dampen this down. The question is whether it'll put it out before we get back into next summer. So what we are seeing now is we are seeing some improvement in soil moisture in the drought. We've seen more significant improvement over the southeast U.S., that core of drought in Georgia over the last couple weeks or so. But we're beginning to see some improvement over the middle part of the nation as well due to the additional snow. And over the last week, over some heavier rain over eastern parts of Oklahoma. Having said that, we still have a long way to go, and you can see these pockets of red. That's anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain in those areas to get us out of the drought. And that's what you see here is the area of rain that's needed. Matter of fact, that area of Oklahoma, I'll put this in here to show that before last week's rain, that is an area that really needed additional rainfall, and very fortunate for that region. It did receive some welcome rainfall. It needed 9 to 12 inches. It received about an inch or two. So that's what I'm saying. It still needs quite a bit of rain. Okay, now this time of year, I know I talk a lot about teleconnections, especially the Arctic oscillation. I wanted to give a review. We've had 3 different oscillations so far this season. Number 1 occurred from early November into the middle part of the month. The second one occurred from the middle part of November through the middle part of December. That was a prolonged negative Arctic oscillation. And more recently, we're in a positive Arctic oscillation and that's indicated by number 3. The red is a forecast of going into a negative again as we get into January. Each one of these is associated with a typical type of precipitation pattern across the nation. So we really have had, so far, 3 distinct precipitation patterns across the nation that have either brought additional or enhanced rainfall, or maybe a decrease in rainfall. So I really depend on those to look at as we go through the winter months. Now I want to run a loop here of precipitation, or the upper jet stream, as we go through the week, and this is the start here. And you might remember last week I said as we were in this positive phase, or neutral or positive phase of the Arctic Oscillation, the upper jet stream, and I'm sort of outlining it here, pulls up to the north, and that's trapping the cold air further to the north. So north of this jet stream is cold, dry, it's a little bit milder. This southerly jet stream, we often get a split flow jet stream, was very weak last week, and even though we had that pattern, which is very conducive of a positive phase, it was pretty weak. Now this week we're going to have a change, and I want to show you the areas of yellow or pockets of energy. And as we go through this week, one such pocket of energy comes from Texas, and then it moves off to the northeast, and it's absorbed by the upper jet stream. That's going to bring a more significant amount of precipitation from Texas up towards the northeast. And it is going to get you sort of see it really diminishes here by the latter part of the week. So it's not going to necessarily turn into a real big system, but it's going to bring a band of precipitation through the central part of the nation. Here's the next one that comes through in that southwest jet. Here it comes through again. And what that does is that also moves through and brings a chance of rain or precipitation later in the week. Now, if we look out a little bit further in the 6 to 10 day, I did want to point out that at least through the 6 to 10 day, as we get in the negative phase once again, what you see here is the possibility of cold air sagging south once again over the middle part of the nation. Remember that? We've seen that before with that negative. And then perhaps some energy ejecting into this region here over the eastern U.S. I don't know if it's going to be way over the southeast U.S., but it's very possible it could be in this corridor right in here, where we get some enhanced precipitation in that period late this week into next week. We'll have to see on that, but I do just want to point out that as we get into that negative phase of the Arctic Oscillation, we do see that digging system again, and it will be sagging cold air into the middle part of the nation and perhaps enhancing precipitation along that transition zone. Now, I haven't talked a whole lot about flooding, but I'll probably start to talk about this a little bit more as we get into the latter part of the winter and into early spring. This is the percent of the upper soil that is estimated through computer modeling to be saturated. And areas of blue are areas that are more saturated, areas of red that are more dry. And these are areas of vulnerability should heavy rain fall over them. And what we see here with this event, as heavy rain develops over parts of Texas, you see it's mainly red, it's going to soak up that rain. But as we get into parts of Arkansas and up towards the northeast, that blue is indicating that upper soils are a lot wetter, so what we'd expect is greater runoff in that area, and that's where we'd expect the potential for flooding. Right now, it's a little early in the season. It's not really the time of year we get extensive flooding, but not too far down the road, I'll be looking at this very closely, the upper soil moisture, especially with that phase of the Arctic Oscillation, to see the possibility of future flooding as we look down further into the later in the year as we get more towards the flooding season. But right now, we do show with this area of blue that there are some areas that are vulnerable for potential of flooding. And here's the rainfall forecast this week. You can see that area of red, and as I just mentioned, Oklahoma is quite a bit wetter, or Arkansas is quite a bit wetter, and that area could receive more enhanced runoff with this heavy rain. I'm not going to rule out some isolated flooding problems as it moves up into that area. Texas is sort of a mixed bag. Far eastern Texas is a bit wetter. We could have some problems in the very far east, but for the most part, that's going to be absorbed into that area and not cause significant flooding problems. You notice over the Pacific Northwest, we have enhanced rainfall once again, it sort of seems like we're alternating one week to the next. This week looks like it's going to be very heavy in the Pacific Northwest once again. And then a very broad part of the central part of the U.S. looks like it'll be dry. As we go out to the 7-day forecast period, that more active band I mentioned too, this is going to be right in that transition here. That looks like an action spot, Pacific Northwest. And that'll also extend into parts of the Northeast. So we're sort of going back and forth between different patterns here. But if we look at the change of forecast soil moisture for the next week, the area in blue here are soils that are going to be generally getting wetter. And you can see very clear that band there. It's narrow, but that's the action spot over the next week, as well as Pacific Northwest. And everything else is fairly dry. As far as trends and threats, I outlined here in blue the areas of more significant rain. And the most significant rain in 3 inches or more is the area in red. So the takeaway points: an active southerly jet this week with a low ejecting out of the southwest U.S. There will be a track of significant rainfall that will, depending on the area, either provide welcome recharge or potential for flooding. And once again, an active Pacific Northwest. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Weekly Water Outlook. I'll be talking to you again next week.